Hey, welcome back, folks. Wanted to revisit a video we made yesterday where we were discussing the trade value for RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, and Julius Randle. And of course, some news broke yesterday where the Knicks re-signed RJ Barrett to an extension, 4 year, $120 million. During when the news broke, Woj basically broke the news. And he also basically put out there that RJ was, in fact, on the table, as was one of the players or was one of the centerpieces on the Knicks side involved in a trade for Donovan Mitchell. And just wanted to go over that real quick to see what go over the parameters. At least we don't know all the parameters of the trade definitively. It's just it's basically we're putting together what we think, what the trade parameters, and based on what we heard in previous articles written. And so, based on previous articles written, it looks like the Knicks were basically going to do the deal for two unprotected Barrett, I guess Evan Fournier, and probably a few other first protected first. They were going to give other protected first round picks. Hopefully, wasn't the pick. If the Utah Jazz doesn't want unprotected picks, because obviously they're trying to downplay it, I think if anything, the Knicks should do the best that they can to keep that Bucks pick. But before we get too far into it, please, everyone that's watching the video, take the time out to like and subscribe this video, like and subscribe to the channel, and really appreciate it. Feel free to hit the notification bell and also comment below. I'll be more than happy to respond to your comments. Appreciate to everyone who's been commenting, who's been watching the videos. It's been a lot of fun lately being able to talk to some of the guys commenting on the videos, and I appreciate it. So basically, as we said, the New York Knicks did extend RJ Barrett. We found out that basically there's a possibility he would have been involved in that Donovan Mitchell trade. Some people believe it wasn't for real, that it wasn't true. I kind of have a feeling that in my opinion, I think they would have, depending on if if the Utah Jazz would have accepted their bit, like basically their offer, I think they would have put R.J. Barrett in that deal. And the reason why I feel that way is because obviously it's they already have Jalen Brunson, right? And they have Jalen Brunson. You have R.J. Barrett. Let's say you did get Donovan Mitchell. So you have Jalen Brunson, R.J. Barrett, Donovan Mitchell, and then Julius Randle. So four out of your five starters are basically ball dominant players. None of them are really 3 and D. I guess RJ could be a 3 and D player. He actually showed that last year. He was off ball a lot, not this past season, but the playoffs, and he actually did pretty okay. His efficiency was actually pretty good when he did that, and so that was good. And however, he is the kind of player that needs the ball in his hands, and because the Knicks now had 4 out of 5 starters that actually need the ball in their hands to operate and feel comfortable, I think they were going to be willing to move. Obviously, the Jazz was not going to accept Julius Randle, but they would have had to make a move if they brought trade to trade someone. Preferably, if they would have brought him Donovan Mitchell without trading RJ, then I think the more likely scenario idea or the more likely thing that would happen is them trading Julius Randle. But in terms of if they had to trade someone for Donovan Mitchell, where it would have decreased the number of picks that they would have had to offer, I think RJ Barrett probably would have been the one they would have had to trade. However, so that's pretty much, why I think the Knicks would have put him into the trade. And also, I think the Utah Jazz would have did want R.J. Barrett, right? Because if you think about it, you think of um, Danny Ainge's MO. The last time he rebuilt the Celtics, the first time he rebuilt the Celtics with Paul Pierce. If you think about it, R.J. Barrett and Paul Pierce they're kind of like the same mold, right? They're sort of the same kind of players. And if you look, Paul Pierce, when we looked at the impact statistics, looking at the correlation between Paul Pierce's performance and the Celtics team performance, it was highly, there was a high correlation between Paul Pierce's performance team's performance. And so I think, and the reason why you're able to have that, if you have a player like Paul Pierce, he can dribble, pass, and shoot. So he can make plays for his teammates. He could get buckets for himself. And he's just a very all around smart basketball player. So he can run an offense through a player like Paul Pierce. RJ Barrett is that kind of player, too, who's a wing. He can handle the basketball. He can make plays for his teammates, get them layups, collapse the defense, and possibly get them 3-point shots. RJ Barrett basically has that ability, right? He's not the same player as Paul Pierce was. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Paul Pierce, but he's kind of that skill set to be on that trajectory, and he hopefully would be able to get there. If he can just improve his efficiency, he can be a player very similar to Paul Pierce, right? And so I think that's the reason why, looking at it now, I think that's the reason why Utah Jazz would have wanted RJ Barrett. And then also, RJ Barrett is only 22, right? He's still extremely young. And so he's a player that they'll be more than willing to basically to take on. I think it would have been a player they would have been willing to take on. So obviously, from what Woj has been saying, the Utah Jazz did want RJ Barrett in this in this deal, and to me, it does make sense, right? It definitely makes sense for the Utah Jazz, and it would have been a great deal. Honestly, I feel like the Utah Jazz may have missed on this one because if you look at it, um, looking at RJ Barrett's basically value in the trade market. Let's say if the New York Knicks made RJ Barrett available and teams had to come look, basically looking to get RJ Barrett, you kind of have to think, okay, what teams right now will be willing to basically pick up RJ Barrett? Right off the back, I know, for example, I think the Wizards would definitely take a shot at RJ Barrett. And so you got to say to yourself, some of these struggling, smaller, younger teams that are younger and they're struggling and they're looking for a star, RJ Barrett, he's not a star yet, but he's kind of getting there. Efficiency is a problem. But there are teams out there that would want RJ Barrett. And then you have to ask yourself, what are those teams? And the last video we made, we went through RJ Barrett's production and compared his production to basically the players that were traded the last 5 to 7 years. We split it up between protected picks market and the unprotected picks market. And so we established the last time that RJ Barrett would be valued at 1 to 2 unprotected picks. And the reason why we said that was because RJ Barrett is really young. He's not a distress. He's not like it's not like, a player with it where his value is distressed because of, let's say, where it just doesn't fit and a team needs to move on from. That's just not the case. And so a lot of times when you have young, talented players, like for example, you see here the ones highlighted in yellow, these are basically wings and guards that are young and talented. And when they were traded by their teams, they were traded for a protected pick. Although, like Levert and D'Angelo Russell, you can make the case that they probably could have went for an unprotected pick, right? Levert basically, when he was traded by the Nets and when D'Angelo Russell was traded by the Nets, basically when they were traded, well, number one, injury was injury. Well, first of all, D'Angelo Russell, when he was traded in 2020, the Nets got uh, basically Kyrie Irving and KD, and so there really wasn't any room for D'Angelo Russell, so he had to get moved, and so they moved him, and he was moved for um, like the first round pick. I think that's what this is. Is it this one here, or is this the move when he got traded from? I'm thinking if this is the move when he got traded from the Warriors to Minnesota Tim. This might be when he got traded from the Warriors to the Timberwolves. I just can't remember. I'm sorry, guys. But essentially, these guys kind of had to get moved because they were poor fit on their team, and then there's injury issues, and then D'Angelo Russell is just not a very good defender either, and so there are serious. It's not like he's a great two-way player, and you don't see D'Angelo Russell necessarily as a needle mover. And so essentially, so he went. Both of these guys went for first round protected picks. And if you look at Jeremy Grant, the problem with Jeremy Grant is like first you look at the PIE, it was extremely low, and he just wasn't really getting much of a burn. at this point, and so you can see why he went for a protected pick. It's just the PIE just was way too low, and I don't think he was getting the minutes that he really needed. And if he was getting, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, right? Let's say something similar to Obi, but then he was showing the production. He had like a higher PIE. Especially, you got to remember Jeremy Grant. He's like he he could play 3 or 4, mostly 4, and so his PIE should have been higher. And so it's easy to see why he went for a first round protected pick instead of being in an unprotected pick market. So in my opinion, I feel like we've established RJ Barrett does not fit in the protected picks market. Number one, because his production was high enough. He was averaging 20 points per game. And he's become actually a decent two-way player. He's become a decent defensive player. And so he's a complete basketball player. But the problem with RJ Barrett, the only issue is because he's extremely inefficient at the moment, right? But I think he just turned 22. And so that efficiency, there's a strong possibility that efficiency improves with a lot more work, a lot more practice, and a lot more playing time by RJ Barrett. And so based on that, he actually belongs over here in unprotected picks market, right? And so there's a lot more guys to compare him to. Like for example, Derek White went for first round unprotected to the Celtics, and RJ Barrett has a 9.9 PIE, and Derek White has a 10.1, and RJ Barrett is averaging more points than Derek White. But obviously, as we established, RJ Barrett, the problem with him is his efficiency. That's been a big problem. Derek White is slightly less more efficient than he is. I think maybe 2 percentage points more efficient in terms of field goal shooting. So, and then the other person we can compare him to is Tobias Harris, who had a 13 PIE. That's uh, about 2 points higher than RJ Barrett, right? But he went for two unprotected, and Tobias was all at this point was he wasn't really a young man, like he was kind of entering his prime, and so he went for two unprotected. Bledsoe was entering into his prime at this point. He went for two unprotected back in 2018, and his PIE was 12.5. He was not a great shooter. He's never been a good shooter. So if you and then here Lou Williams 13.3, which is also higher than RJ Barrett. Actually, let me change. This is 3 points higher than RJ. This is about 2.5 points higher than RJ, and this is about 3 points, almost 3.5 points higher than RJ. And so Lou Williams went for one unprotected pick. At this point, Lou Williams was basically entering his prime as well. He wasn't a spring chicken or a young player at the time. And so RJ Barrett, he fits more closely, I think, with Derek White. I think he's a better player than Derek White, in my opinion, because he can actually put up more points than Derek White can. Derek White is a very smart basketball player, but I think RJ Barrett can actually fill up the stat sheets a lot better than Derek White can in terms of points production. And we've seen, and I think they talked about, uh, was it this year where he had like 11 30-point games or something like that, or is it throughout the course of his career? Whatever it is, but I mean, the kid, RJ Barrett can score. Obviously, efficiency is still an issue, but he can definitely score. And so you can say the base is like Derek White, right? Because this is basically the bottom that we saw, because he went for one unprotected, and you can make a strong case that RJ is better than Derek White, right? And so Derek White went for one unprotected, right? And then Lou Williams, you can make a case that RJ Barrett is could be also better than Lou Williams, but Lou Williams at this point had much higher PIE than RJ Barrett did have because he was a lot more efficient than RJ Barrett was obviously at this point in Lou Williams' career. Excuse me. And so you can say, but RJ Barrett, you have to basically look at his upside, right? And so you can make the case that there is upside to RJ. The base case is RJ is worth one unprotected pick. The dude was a first round number 3 pick overall. So you have to get at least one unprotected pick for RJ Barrett, right? And so and then the high case is like at this moment, if you basically are optimistic with where he's gonna be, you can say, okay, do you think RJ Barrett is gonna be better than Bledsoe? I would say yes. Do you think RJ Barrett is going to be better than Lou Williams? I would say yes. Do you think RJ Barrett is going to be better than Tobias Harris? That I would say probably yes, right? I would say yes because, in my opinion, you cannot run an offense through Tobias Harris, but you can run an offense through RJ. The problem with running an offense through RJ right now is because of his efficiency. I'll keep beating that dead horse, but I have to keep stating that, right? Uh, but that's so. But Tobias is right now. It seems like okay. It would be great if RJ Barrett could be as good as Tobias was in terms of efficiency. However, however, I you can run an offense through RJ. You cannot run an offense through Tobias Harris. So RJ Barrett, I think, will be a better player than Tobias Harris. And so if you think he's going to be better than these guys because of the trajectory that he's on right now, just given the skill sets he have and his level of production, then you have to say, okay, he's worth the high the high point, or let's say right now you can say the optimistic case is you can get two unprotected pick for RJ. But the base case, you know, the bottom in terms of unprotected pick you can get for RJ, you have to say he won. And he doesn't belong in a protected picks market because his value is not distressed because he doesn't fit on the team and he's still really young and he's a two-way player, right? And so that's why, and so now we've established again that we feel that RJ Barrett is worth between one protected right now. At this moment, he's worth between one and two unprotected picks. Right. The New York Knicks basically had on the table from basically the reports that we're trying to piece together. We're not sure if this is true, but basically on the table there was two unprotected picks: RJ Barrett, Evan Fournier, right, and then there was going to be some other protected picks. Honestly, in my opinion, I think that was a little too much. I think that would have been a haul for the Utah Jazz because you're getting someone who's probably going to be able to, if he improves his efficiency, he's going to provide that same command and control over the offense that Donovan Mitchell had when we did that. Announcement how well the team played as a result of him being on the floor. Um, RJ Barrett is going to be able to provide that for the Utah Jazz as well. It would have been an excellent swap, right? And then on top of that, RJ Barrett, because he's bigger than Donovan Mitchell, he's going to be just a better defender. If he basically gets his efficiency up, he's going to be look, as crazy as it sounds, if he can get his efficiency up and he starts to shoot 45, 46% from the field, averaging 24 points per game, at that point, you can say you're going to be better off with RJ Barrett than you're going to be better off with Donovan Mitchell because RJ Barrett will be a two-way player at that point, right? Although this past season, towards the second half of the year, he was choosing when to play defense, and so, but that's why I think basically the Utah Jazz may have missed the boat, like really missed an opportunity here, you know, to get to replace Donovan Mitchell, and then also have some picks going forward. You know, I don't know how much those picks would have been really worth, in my opinion, because given the trajectory of the Knicks, if it was all the unprotected picks they would have been looking for, obviously I guess the Knicks would have had to give maybe 23 and 25, or maybe 25 and 27, or 24, 26, something in that range. But I don't think it would have been those unprotected picks would have been that valuable because the trajectory of the team just kind of it seems to show that the Knicks are not going to be picking in the lottery very often over the next like 8 years, especially given the kind of talent they have, the young kids that they have. It's just not going to happen. They just have too many young players that are getting better over time. And these like Manu Quickly is, I think, is extremely talented. And from the analysis that I did the last 40 games of the season, the analysis looks like he's a starting point guard. You know, in my opinion, I feel like he dominates the ball a little too much. However, I mean, these numbers, they just wasn't, it just doesn't lie. You know, his performance the last 40 games of the season was really good. It was starting point guard performance. And then if you look at the last 30 games, it's even more compelling. It's really crazy. I mean, the last 30 games, he was the way he was the way he was able to impact the offense. It's it kind of was on the same. when we did the analysis that we did a couple of weeks ago on Donovan Mitchell, and his impact on the Utah Jazz offense, right? And then you also include Obi Toppin, and then you have Randall. It's just there's way too much talent on this team for them to really be consistently in the lottery, and especially if they keep this competent front office, they're competent so far, and then you also have a good competent coach. I think they're just not going to be in the lottery. So that for the first round picks for the New York Knicks, it's not really going to be worth a ton. Let's say they're a middle of the road team and they're picking around, let's say 16, 17, which would either, like, let's say if they were 6, 7 seed and they're picking like 17, they're getting like 17 pick or something like that, or 18 pick. Uh, it wouldn't be great for the Knicks. It wouldn't be great for the Jazz either in terms of what those picks are. Uh, but but it is what it is. But I still do feel like the Jazz uh, may have missed the boat, right? In terms of because they may have missed the boat on a straight, in my opinion. And so, and for the Knicks, I think they were slightly going to be overpaying, especially given the fact that the Knicks were giving up R.J. Barrett, two unprotected picks, and possibly two to three other protected picks. I think that would have been a little too much to give up for Donovan Mitchell, and I'm glad the New York Knicks didn't do it because I think it just wouldn't have been. I don't think it would have been a good trade, a great trade for the Knicks, in my opinion. Um, so that's pretty much what I think about basically this trade that was proposed that didn't happen. And I'm glad it didn't happen. And, just reiterating, basically and the reason why I feel like it wasn't good because RJ Barrett, I feel he's worth one to two unprotected picks. One is basically is the bottom of what he's worth in terms of picks. Two unprotected is a very optimistic view, but is not that optimistic if you look at basically the players that were in the unprotected picks market in his like that were at the wing position over the last 5 to 7 years. It's not that unrealistic, right? If you see what some of these other guys went for, right? And so that's why I just think it was not because that's equivalent to essentially giving the Jazz would like to see Evan Fournier. Oh, it's like um, players to play right. And so, and if you want to make a trade, uh, you got to make the salaries match. But then the idea supposedly is, oh, then the Knicks will have to give them a pick to put Fournier in the deal. I mean, that's just stupid and nonsense, right? It's like that's just stupid. If we have to put a pick to make the deal work because we're adding Fournier, that's stupid. Then give us a pick in return. Give us a pick swap in return to make for taking on uh, salary. I mean, I think a lot of these ideas that people have, because even the Knicks will have to send an extra pick for sending Fournier. I mean, that's just stupid. Why would we send an extra pick because we're swapping salaries? You guys are sending it, like I said, you guys are sending us like Donovan Mitchell, who's making over 30 million, right? And because we need to make the salaries match, we need to send an extra pick. That just it just doesn't make any sense. But like I said, then you guys sent us an extra pick, for taking on Donovan Mitchell's salary, and then it makes it even. But I think a lot of people they're just not really thinking about it appropriately the right way. I feel like although people don't feel that way, but if you really break it down, it's like the Knicks would have been basically giving up too much. Like I said, this will be an equivalent of giving up four unprotected picks. Fournier, and then whatever other protected picks they were looking for. That's what it's really equivalent to. And then other people that are talking about basically the Knicks still getting them where they send basically the Knicks send two unprotected and then get another team to send another unprotected. So why would another team send? Um, I guess maybe to make the salary match. If like for example, if the Lakers sent in order to make the salary match, the Lakers could send uh, Westbrook to the Jazz, right, along with a first round pick, right? And what would the Knicks send to the Lakers in return, right? Well, Knicks don't have to send anything to the Lakers because the Lakers are just looking to offload Westbrook for the most part. So I guess I understand what some people are saying. For me, as long as the Knicks don't have to give up any extra talent, any young talent to basically get another team to send extra picks to the Jazz, then I'm all for it. But if the Knicks are giving up, like, let's say, two unprotected, then they got to give up other young pieces. I think that's a bad idea because I've already gone through the evaluation for looked at basically trade values for IQ and um, for IQ and OB based on their production level and then also based on their skill set. And those guys are also worth one to two unprotected. And those guys have higher PIE than RJ Barrett does. So the efficiency, their production level is actually in terms of when you look at the efficiency, because the PIE basically is what is play impact efficiency. It's higher for those guys, right? RJ is only 9.9 at the moment. I think what's name is like 13.5 Obi Toppin, and IQ I think is around 11 point something or maybe 12, right? And so based on that, those guys are worth like basically one are trending up. Those are basically going to be basically fringe. In my opinion, those two are probably going to be fringe all stars, both IQ and Obi Toppins. And I think people are basically drastically undervaluing. Uh, that's pretty much what I have. Let me know what you think about this, about the trade that happened. How many picks do you guys think RJ is worth? Right. Let me know what you think. Please feel free to comment below. I'll be more than happy to respond. Thank you. Have a good night.